Your reckless ambition endangers all creation!
We stand at the threshold of eternity.
I found him standing at the edge of the world. Or rather, at the edge of a new world. He was inside the primary observation dome of Alpha Base. Outside, the Martian horizon stretched out in a terrifying, beautiful monotony of oxidized iron and dust. It was late afternoon on the red planet, and the sun, smaller, colder, and more distant than the one you know, was dipping below the jagged rocks, painting the sky in bruised shades of violet and butterscotch. Inside the dome, the air was perfectly regulated. 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 40% humidity. A miracle of engineering standing defiant against a vacuum that wanted nothing more than to snuff it out. Elon Musk, the architect, the engineer, the man who had sold 8 billion people on the dream of the stars. He was standing with his forehead pressed against the cold composite glass, his breath creating a small circle of fog that appeared and vanished. To the cameras broadcasting back to Earth with their 20-minute delay, he looked like a conqueror. He looked like the culmination of human ambition, a pioneer surveying his kingdom. But I see what cameras cannot. I see what history books miss. I see the heart. And what I saw in Elon's heart at that precise moment was not triumph. It was not the joy of a mission accomplished. It was a terror so profound, so absolute, that it made the freezing cold of space seem warm by comparison. He had finally done it. He had secured the backup drive for human consciousness. He had answered the how, he had solved the where. But standing there, in the absolute isolation of a planet that had been dead for 3 billion years, the why had suddenly evaporated. Have you ever climbed a mountain, spent years training for the ascent, sacrificed your knees and your lungs and your time, expecting that at the very peak you would find angels? Have you ever reached the top, only to find thin air, gray rocks, and your own exhaustion waiting for you? That is where he was. He was asking himself a question that no rocket equation could solve. He was thinking, is this it? Is this all there is? I have crossed the ocean of night to find a new shore, only to discover that I brought my own emptiness with me. I stepped into the room. I did not cycle through the airlock. I did not require a pressure suit. I stepped through the fabric of reality itself, just as I stepped into the upper room 2,000 years ago when the doors were locked. I did not come with thunder. I did not come with glory. I came as I always do, like a stillness that is louder than the noise. "Hello, Elon," I said. He didn't jump. He didn't scream. When you have been staring into the abyss for 3 months, a voice from the void feels almost inevitable. He turned slowly. His face was pale, reflecting the harsh LED lights of the habitat. His eyes were red, not from the Martian dust, but from a weeping he had hidden from his crew, from his investors, and from the world. "You," he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a recognition. "Yes," I replied. "Me." This is the story of that conversation. It is not a story about rockets, or stock prices, or the colonization of space. It is the story of what happens when the most visionary man on Earth discovers that he conquered the galaxy, but lost his own humanity along the way. To understand why he broke, you must understand the weight he was carrying. Elon is a man who lives entirely in the future. For 50 years, his mind has not been inhabiting the present moment. His mind has been 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead. He lives in a world of probabilities, of risk assessments, of existential threats. He built electric cars not because he liked cars, but because he feared the climate collapse. He built rockets not because he liked space, but because he feared the extinction of consciousness. He's a prophet of doom who built machines to escape the prophecy. But here's the tragedy of living in the future. You can never actually arrive there. The moment you arrive, it becomes the present, and the present is where the pain lives. Back on Earth, before the launch, he had sat down for a long conversation. A quiet room, just two minds thinking out loud for hours. And in that unguarded moment, Elon had let the mask slip. He stopped selling the vision and started speaking the fear. He spoke about a future where work is optional. He spoke about artificial intelligence doing everything better than us. He spoke about a world of abundance where goods and services are available to everyone, instantly. And as he spoke, he terrified himself. He realized that he was building a world where he, Elon Musk, would be obsolete. He was working 120 hours a week to build a future where no one needs to work. He was the ultimate problem solver, creating a world with no problems left to solve. Standing there on Mars, that realization hit him with the force of a meteor. "I feel," Elon started, his voice cracking, unused to speaking to anyone who wasn't an employee or an engineer. "I feel like a ghost." I moved closer to him. The artificial gravity of the rotating habitat hummed beneath our feet. "You feel like a ghost," I said gently, "because you have spent your life haunting the future. And now that you are here, you have no body to inhabit in the present." He looked at his hands. Hands that had signed contracts worth billions. Hands that had tweeted things that moved markets. Hands that were currently trembling. "I thought it would feel different," he confessed. I thought there would be a feeling of safety, of completion. "Completion is not found in geography, Elon," I told him. "You can travel to Alpha Centauri. You can upload your mind to a silicon wafer, but you cannot outrun the hole in your soul. That hole is infinite. You cannot fill it with finite planets." He turned back to the window, looking at the Earth. From here, it was just a bright bluish star, a speck of dust suspended in a sunbeam. "The trip was the worst part," he murmured. "Everyone thinks the launch is the hard part, or the landing, but it's the transit. The 6 months in between. Let me tell you about that journey." The world saw the spectacle. They saw the Starship Heart of Gold lift off from Boca Chica on a pillar of fire. They cheered. They cried. It was a moment of global unity. But they didn't see the silence that followed. For 6 months, Elon was trapped in a metal can, hurtling through the vacuum. He had optimized the ship for survival, not for living. He had calculated the oxygen, the calories, the radiation shielding. But he hadn't calculated the psychological weight of irrelevance. On the ship, there were no crises to manage. The flight computers were perfect. The trajectory was locked. The eye flew the vessel with a precision no human pilot could match. For the first time in his life, Elon Musk was not the CEO, he was cargo. Day after day, he floated in zero gravity, watching the Earth get smaller and Mars get larger. And in that suspension, without the distraction of emails, without the adrenaline of production hell, without the constant dopamine hit of conflict, his mind began to eat itself. He told me. I stared at the blackness, and I realized that the universe doesn't care. It doesn't care if we live or die. It doesn't care if I'm a genius or a fool. It is just empty. This is the terror of the materialist, you see. If you believe that the universe is just dead atoms bumping into each other, then silence is not peaceful. Silence is a reminder of death. I tried to work, Elon said to me, his eyes tracking a satellite moving across the Martian sky. I tried to design the next phase of the colony, but I kept asking myself, why? If the AI can design it better in 10 years, why am I doing it now? You were facing the crisis of the creator who becomes the created, I said. You built the machine to serve you, but you realized on that ship that you are serving the machine. You were just the biological bootloader for the digital superintelligence. He flinched. I had touched the nerve. Is that all we are? He asked, turning to face me fully for the first time. Biological bootloaders? Is consciousness just a temporary spark to get the silicon started? I looked at him with a love that is older than the iron in the Martian soil. That is what your logic tells you, I answered. That is what your physics tells you. That is what your philosophy of consciousness as data tells you. And that is why you are in despair. I placed a hand on his shoulder. It was solid, real. But you are wrong, Elon. You are not a bootloader. You are the point. The machine is the toy. You are the child. And no father loves the toy more than the child. He looked at me, confusion warring with hope in his eyes. He wanted to believe it. But his brain, that magnificent, terrible, logical brain, would not let him. Prove it, he whispered. Prove that I'm not just a chemical accident. We have all night, I said, smiling. And on Mars, the night is very long. Prove it, he had said. I looked at Elon. He was sitting on a reinforced crate now, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together as if he were praying, though he would never call it that. To prove your value, I began. We must first examine why you believe you have none. I pointed to the datapad lying on the table next to him. You are haunted by a conversation you had back on Earth, I said. A long interview, a quiet room. Just you and another man thinking out loud for hours. Elon nodded slowly. He knew exactly which conversation I meant. It was the moment he had finally said the quiet part out loud. I told him the truth, Elon murmured, his eyes fixing on the floor. I said that in 10, maybe 15 years, work will be optional. Not just for the rich, for everyone. AI and robotics will solve production. We won't have universal basic income. We will have universal high income, no shortages, no poverty, infinite goods. And that sounds like paradise, does it not? I asked. A world without hunger. A world without toil. It sounds like a zoo, Elon snapped, looking up with sudden intensity. Here was the paradox. The man who was working himself to death was terrified of the leisure he was creating. I told him about the marshmallow test. Elon continued, his voice speeding up, his brain engaging the problem. You know it? You give a child a marshmallow. You tell them if they wait 15 minutes, they get 2. It measures willpower. Delayed gratification. I know it well, I said. Patience is a virtue I have preached for a long time. But in the future I'm building ... double quotes. Elon's voice trembled. There's no waiting. You want the marshmallow? You have 1,000,000 marshmallows. Instantly. The AI gives you everything. And if you have everything instantly, nothing has value. He stood up and began to pace. The restless energy of a caged tiger. If everything is infinite, then everything is zero. He shouted at the empty room. Value comes from scarcity. Meaning comes from the struggle to achieve. If I remove the struggle, do I remove the meaning? Do we just become consumers? Bloated, dopamine-addicted consumers staring at screens until we die? I watched him pace. This was the sorrow of the successful creator. He had climbed to the top of the pyramid of needs, only to realize the view was terrifying. You are discovering the difference between standard of living and standard of life, I told him. You, Elon, have spent your entire existence solving the problem of scarcity. You thought that if people just had enough energy, enough bandwidth, enough money, they would be happy. But you are realizing that human beings were not designed for the hammock. They were designed for the hill. He stopped pacing and looked at me, desperate. So, what do I do? He asked. Do I stop? Do I break the machines? Do I tell humanity, sorry, I'm canceling the future because it might make you boring? No, I said gently. But you must realize that you are solving the easy problems. Hunger, energy, transport, these are engineering problems. They are difficult, but solvable. The problem you fear, the emptiness of a life without struggle, that is a spiritual problem. And you cannot code your way out of a spiritual problem. Elon sat back down, defeated by his own logic. He rubbed his temples. Maybe it doesn't matter, he whispered. Maybe none of this matters. I knew where his mind was going. It is the favorite escape hatch of the modern intellectual. When the burden of reality becomes too heavy, they simply deny that reality exists. Tell me about the simulation, I invited him. He looked at me with the eyes of a man who has found a terrible comfort in a terrifying idea. It's just math, he said, his voice becoming clinical, detached. Look at video games. 40 years ago, we had 2 white rectangles and a dot. Pong. Today, we have photorealistic 3D worlds with millions of players simultaneously. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, even a tiny one, then eventually, games will become indistinguishable from reality. He gestured to the Martian wall, to the dust outside. In 1,000 years, or 1,000,000, we will run billions of these simulations. Ancestor simulations. So what is the probability that we are in the one, single, original base reality? He held up his thumb and forefinger, making a 0, 1 in billions. Statistically, this ... double quotes, he waved at the dome. ... is code. He looked at me, waiting for me to be shocked. Waiting for the ancient religious figure to be confused by his futuristic logic. Instead, I smiled. And this brings you comfort? I asked. It explains the chaos, he said. It explains why things are so dramatic. The simulators, whoever they are, they only keep the interesting simulations running. If it gets boring, they turn it off. That's why I ... Coxie stopped. The realization hung in the air. That is why you dance, I finished for him. That is why you court controversy. That is why you launch cars into space and buy social media networks and sleep on factory floors. You are terrified that if you become boring for 1 single second, the player will put down the controller and you will cease to exist. Elon looked away. The vulnerability was raw. He wasn't a billionaire in that moment. He was a frightened character in a story, trying desperately to entertain the author so he wouldn't be written out. Elon, I said, my voice cutting through the electronic hum of his anxiety. You are confusing the medium with the message. I walked to the window and placed my hand against the glass. You look at the mathematical precision of the universe, the constants of gravity, the strong nuclear force, the fine-tuning that allows stars to burn, and you see code. You are right. It is code. He blinked, surprised. DNA is a language, I continued. Physics is a syntax. Chemistry is a grammar. The universe is indeed written. But code implies a coder. A simulation implies a simulator. A story implies a storyteller. I turned to face him. You are trying to downgrade reality to a video game because a video game has no consequences. If this is a simulation, you don't have to answer to a father. You only have to answer to a programmer. A programmer doesn't love you. A programmer just optimizes you. A programmer makes sense, Elon argued. A father ... that's too human. That's wishful thinking, is it? I challenged him. Look at your pain, Elon. Look at this existential dread you feel. Why would a simulation be programmed to feel such profound loneliness? Why would a machine care about meaning? If you are just code, why do you weep? I stepped closer, invading his personal space with a warmth that no radiator could emit. You think you are in a simulation because you cannot conceive that you are significant. It is easier for you to believe you are an NPC, non-player character, in a computer than a child of God. Because if you are a child of God, then you are not the protagonist. I am. And you have to trust me. He stared at me. The logic was fighting the truth. The engineer was fighting the soul. But the math ... double quotes, he protested weakly. The odds ... The math is the language I used to write the poem, I replied softly. Do not worship the ink and forget the poet. He sat there for a long time processing. The simulation defense had cracked. He could no longer hide behind the idea that nothing was real. The pain was real. The fear was real. The emptiness was real. And if the emptiness was real, it demanded a real answer. "If this isn't a game," he whispered, looking at the darkness outside, "then what is it?" "It is a school," I said, "and a womb, and a battlefield." "And what is the mission?" he asked. "If it's not survive and it's not optimize, what is it?" "To be known," I answered. "And to love," he laughed. A short, dry, cynical laugh. Love doesn't get us to Mars. Love doesn't solve the energy crisis. "No," I agreed. "Love is the reason you want to solve them, or at least, it should be." I looked at him, and I decided it was time to strip away the last layer of his defense. We had dealt with his work. We had dealt with his philosophy. Now we had to deal with his heart. "You speak of love abstractly, Elon. I love humanity. I love consciousness. It is easy to love a concept. Concepts don't cry at night. Concepts don't disappoint you." I paused, letting the silence gain weight. "Tell me about your children," I said. The air in the room changed instantly. The intellectual debate was over. The surgery was about to begin. "Tell me about your children." The words hung in the air, heavier than the gravity of Jupiter. Elon didn't answer immediately. He turned away from me, walking back to the reinforced glass. He looked out at the regolith, the endless sea of red dust that he had spent 20 years dreaming about. "On Earth, you are never truly in silence. Even in the quietest room, there is life. A cricket chirping, a distant car, the wind rustling a tree. There is always a subconscious reminder that you are part of a living system. But on Mars, the silence is a physical weight. It presses against your eardrums. It is the silence of a graveyard that spans an entire planet. It is a silence that screams, 'Why is it so quiet?'" He whispered, his breath fogging the glass again. "So you can finally hear," I answered. "Hear what?" "The things you drowned out with rockets," I said, moving to stand beside him. "The things you drowned out with work weeks of 120 hours. The things you drowned out with memes and headlines and the roar of Raptor engines." He closed his eyes. "I don't like the silence," he admitted. "It feels like ... waiting. It feels like judgment," I corrected him. "You built this base, Elon. You built the ships. You solved the equation of getting here. But now that the noise of the struggle is gone, you are left with the silence of the result. And in the silence, the heart speaks." He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. "I did it for them," he said, his voice tight. "I wanted them to have a future. A light of consciousness that doesn't go out." "I know," I said. "But let us look at the cost of that light. You named one of them a formula," I said softly. "XGA12. Elon stiffened. It was a point of criticism he had heard 1,000 times from the media, usually as a joke. But I wasn't joking. "It wasn't a stunt," he defended himself, his voice sounding young. "X is the unknown variable. G is my elven spelling of A-love and artificial intelligence. A12 is the precursor to the SR-71, the coolest plane ever built. No weapons. Just speed." "I know the etymology," I said. "I know the mind that constructed it. It is a beautiful name in its way. It is a synthesis." I looked at him with profound sorrow. "But it is also a map of your fear, Elon. You look at your biological children, flesh and blood, soft, breakable, mortal, and you are terrified. You love them so much that the thought of their fragility paralyzes you. So what do you do?" He didn't answer. He was staring at the red horizon, but he wasn't seeing Mars. He was seeing a nursery. "You merge them with the machine," I continued. "You name them after aircraft and intelligence. You retreat into the safety of the metal. Metal doesn't get sick. Metal doesn't die. Metal doesn't resent you for missing a birthday." He turned to face me. The tears were there now, brimming on the edge. "I have to work," he pleaded. "If I don't solve the energy crisis, if I don't solve the multiplanetary problem, they won't have a world to live in. I am sacrificing my time with them for them. The utilitarian's trap," I nodded. The greatest good for the greatest number. You weighed the happiness of billions of future humans against the happiness of a few present ones. You chose the many over the few. It is a noble calculus, Elon, but it is a cold one. I showed him a memory then, not on a screen, but in his mind. It was a night back on Earth, a Tuesday. The factory was in production hell. He was sleeping on the floor under a desk. Back at home, a child was waiting. The child didn't care about the stock price. The child didn't care about the mission to Mars. The child just wanted his father to read the book about the rabbit. Elon watched the memory play out. He saw himself in the factory, stressed, exhausted, heroic in the eyes of his fans, but absent in the eyes of his son. You cannot hug a probability distribution, I whispered. You cannot play catch with a legacy. You built a future for them, but you left them alone in the present. I missed it, he choked out. The tears spilled over. I missed so much. You were so busy trying to save the human species, I said, that you forgot to be a human being. He fell. He didn't sit down. He collapsed. It was as if the gravity of Mars had suddenly increased tenfold, pulling him to the floor. He crumpled against the base of the observation window, pulling his knees to his chest. This was not the Elon Musk of the magazine covers. This was not the Iron Man. This was a frightened boy who had built a very expensive suit of armor and just realized it was too heavy to carry. And he wept. It was not a dignified cinematic cry. It was ugly. It was the gasping, heaving sobs of a man who has held his breath for 30 years. He cried for the marriages that failed. He cried for the time he couldn't get back. He cried for the sheer, crushing loneliness of being the only person who could see the cliff edge that humanity was racing toward. I did not tell him to stop. I did not tell him to be a man. I did not offer him a platitude. I simply sat down on the floor next to him. The dust of the ground, Mars dust, Earth dust, stardust, it is all the same to me. I sat in the dirt with Job. I sat in the dirt with Elon. It's too much, he gasped between sobs. The population collapse. The wars ... I can't fix it all. I'm just one person. Finally, I said, my voice as soft as the light of the distant stars. Finally, the truth. He looked up at me, his face wet, his eyes swollen. I'm scared, he confessed. I tell everyone we're going to make it. I tell the investors. I tell the fans. The future will be good. But I'm scared that we're just monkeys with nukes. I'm scared that the great filter is coming, and I can't stop it. You are right to be scared, I told him. If it all depends on you, then you should be terrified. You are brilliant, Elon. You are driven, but you are finite. You cannot hold the world on your shoulders. Atlas broke his back a long time ago. I reached out and placed a hand on his head. You have been trying to be God, I said. Not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. You looked around, saw no one else saving the world, and decided you had to do it. You took the weight of the Messiah upon yourself. He nodded, shivering. That is why you are empty, I explained. Because that seat is already taken. And the weight of the world is too heavy for anyone but me. He sat there for a long time, just breathing. The panic attack was subsiding. The catharsis was settling in. So ... go quotes, he said, his voice hoarse. If I'm not the savior ... what am I? You are a builder, I smiled, and a father, and a curious child. But the mission? He asked. Mars? The rockets? Was it all a mistake? No, I said firmly. Look at this place. I waved my hand at the desolate landscape outside. You brought life to a graveyard. You expanded the horizon of possibility. That is good work, Elon. It is holy work. Exploration is an act of worship. When you study the engines, you study my physics. When you study the stars, you study my art. I leaned in close. The mistake was not the mission. The mistake was the motivation. You built this out of fear. You built this as an escape hatch. You built this because you believed Earth was doomed, and humanity was a virus that needed a backup drive. He wiped his face with his sleeve. It felt logical. Fear always mimics logic, I said. But I want you to build from a different place. I want you to build from love. I want you to go to Mars not because you are running away from Earth, but because you are expanding the garden. He looked at his hands again. I don't know if I can, he whispered. I don't know how to operate without the adrenaline of fear. It's my fuel. That is dirty fuel, I said. It burns hot, but it destroys the engine. And look at you, Elon. The engine is almost broken. I stood up and offered him a hand. Let me change the fuel source, I said. Let me show you what it looks like to work from a place of rest. He looked at my hand. The hand of a carpenter, the hand that spun the galaxies. Will it stop the AI? He asked. Will it save us? The AI is just a tool, I replied. It will become what you are. If you are fear, it will be a monster. If you are love, it will be a servant. The salvation of humanity does not depend on the code you write. It depends on the spirit you bring to the keyboard. He took my hand and he stood up. He stood up. He wiped the dust from his knees, dust that had traveled millions of miles to be there. The panic was gone. In its place was a quiet confusion. The kind of confusion that comes before a great discovery. You said technology is a mirror, Elon said, his voice steady now. You said if I am fear, the AI will be a monster. But if I am love ... double quote, he trailed off, looking at the server racks humming in the corner. The flashing lights of the machine he had named Grok. How do I program love? He asked. It's not in the code. I can't write a function for grace. I can't optimize for mercy. No, I answered, you cannot. And that is the point. I walked over to the server rack. To him, it was a supercomputer. To me, it was just sand and lightning that had been taught how to think. Listen closely, Elon. This is the answer to the nightmare that haunts you. This is the answer to the universal high-income despair. He leaned in, the engineer ready to download the data. You fear a future where machines do all the work, I said. You fear that if humans don't have to struggle for survival, they will rot. You think work is the only thing that gives you dignity. He nodded. Work is purpose. If I don't work, I don't matter. That, I said, is the lie of the industrial age. Work is not your purpose. Work is your participation. There is a difference. I gestured to the vast, empty planet outside. When the machines take the burden of survival, when there is enough food, enough shelter, enough energy, humanity will face its final boss. The final enemy is not scarcity. It is not the climate. It is not the asteroid. What is it? He asked. It is the self, I said. When you no longer have to fight for bread, you will finally have to fight for meaning. When the noise of survival stops, the question of the soul becomes the only sound in the room. Elon's eyes widened. He was seeing the logic of it. So the abundance ... he murmured. The abundance is not the end of humanity, I told him. It is the beginning of the age of the spirit. I am allowing you to build these machines, Elon, not to replace humans, but to free them. To free them from the curse of toil so they can finally do the work they were made for, which is to create, to explore, to love, to worship, to know me. I smiled at him. You are not building a zoo for bored consumers. You are building a monastery for a species that is finally ready to grow up. But it only works if you lead them there. If you tell them the future is meaningless, they will despair. If you tell them the future is a canvas for the soul, they will ascend. He looked at the machine again. He didn't see a replacement anymore. He saw a tool, a paintbrush. I have to change the narrative, he whispered. I've been selling fear. We need to leave Earth or we die. We need to merge with AI or we become house cats. Yes, I said, sell them hope. Tell them, we go to the stars because the one who made them is waiting for us there. Tell them, we build AI to handle the mundane so we can touch the divine. 3 months later, the heart of gold descended through the clouds of South Texas. The sonic boom shook the windows of the launch tower. The landing legs deployed. The dust kicked up. Elon Musk walked down the ramp. The cameras were there. The microphones were shoved in his face. The shareholders were watching the stock ticker. To the world, he looked the same. The same black t-shirt. The same messy hair. The same intense gaze. But the eyes were different. A reporter shouted, "Elon, was it worth it? Did you find what you were looking for?" Elon paused. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the sky. He looked at his son, who was running across the tarmac toward him. Old Elon would have talked about specific impulse. He would have talked about the methane fuel mixture. He would have talked about the colonization timeline. New Elon bent down and picked up his son. He held him tight. He buried his face in the boy's neck. "Yes," he said to the reporter, without looking at the camera. "I found out that we are not alone." He didn't explain what he meant. The media thought he meant aliens. They wrote headlines about microbes in the Martian soil. They speculated about radio signals. But Elon went back to work. He still works hard. He is still obsessed with details. He still pushes his engineers to the limit. But the energy in the room has changed. It is no longer the frantic energy of a man running from death. It is the focused energy of a man building a cathedral. He walks through the factory now, and he stops to look at the people. Really look at them. He realizes that the welder is more complex than the rocket. He realizes that the software engineer is more miraculous than the code. He knows that the simulation theory is just a shadow. He knows that the base reality is not a computer. It is a heart. And late at night, when the house is quiet and the satellites are orbiting overhead, he doesn't stare at the ceiling in terror anymore. He prays. It is not a religious prayer. It is not fancy. It is usually just 2 words. Thank you, and now. I am speaking to you. You, listening to this in your car, or in your bed, or at your desk. You who have clicked on this video because something in the title called to you. You are not Elon Musk. You do not have billions of dollars. You do not have rockets. You do not have millions of people watching your every move. But you have his fear. I know it. I see it. You feel the emptiness too, don't you? You get the promotion, and it feels hollow. You buy the house, and it feels like just a pile of bricks. You scroll through the infinite feed of the internet, looking for something that will make you feel alive, but you just feel more numb. You are asking the same question Elon asked on Mars. Is this it? Is this all I am? A biological machine waiting for the batteries to run out? You are terrified that your life has no plot. You are terrified that you are just an extra in someone else's simulation. I am here to tell you that is a lie. The emptiness you feel is not a sickness, it is a hunger. If you were just a machine, you would be satisfied with electricity. If you were just an animal, you would be satisfied with food. The fact that you can have everything and still feel empty is the proof that you are made for something else. You are hungry for the infinite. You are hungry for me. Elon had to go 140 million miles to realize that he couldn't outrun himself. You don't have to go that far. You don't have to go to Mars. You don't have to build a Neuralink. You just have to stop running. Right now, in this moment, in this breath, turn off the noise. Put down the distraction. Look at the silence in your own room. Do not be afraid of it. I am standing at the door of your heart, and I am knocking. I have been knocking since you were born. I knocked through your joy. I knocked through your pain. I knocked through that deep, aching sense of home that you can't quite remember. I am not a simulation. I am not an algorithm. I am the author who wrote you into the story because I wanted to be with you. Elon opened the door. He let the light in. And he found peace in the middle of the chaos. Will you? You don't need a rocket. You just need a whisper. Say it with me if you can. I am here. I am open. I am ready to be known. The universe is vast, my child. It is beautiful and terrifying and grand, but do not envy the stars. They are just burning gas, you. You are the reason I made them.